Hi, everyone, and welcome back. We are going to cover Chapter 11 today, which covers stress and health-related job hazards. So we've discussed that policing is an incredibly stressful job, and that comes with a lot of side effects, and we're going to talk about how to, what some of that stress is and how to manage some of that stress. So the first thing I want you to know is that the stress of policing is cumulative. It's not just stress that it happened, it's gone, and it's over. No, stress is it builds upon itself over the years of a career. So it compounds and it takes a physical and a mental and emotional toll. So stress is tension, it's anxiety, it's worry, but there's also two types of stress. So there's the regular stress that we all think of where you feel overwhelmed by something. But there's also something called eustress. That's EU and then stress, eustress. And that is tension and anxiety that's caused by positive things, right? And most people don't usually factor this in that when you're having a positive event in your life, but it's a big change, it causes you stress. So that can be something like getting a promotion, right? Getting a promotion is a good thing, but it's also a little intimidating. There's a lot of change. You're worried about how it's going to work out. Things like having a baby, things like getting married, these are all good things, but they don't come without their stress. So I want you to know the difference between just regular stress and eustress. Stress can happen in the immediate situation as a response to a trigger in the environment, but there's also stress that happens over the long term, and that's that more cumulative stress that I just mentioned, that it's what we call the slow burn, right? Over a very long period of time, that stress that just it's ever present and it's always eating away at a person. Managing stress is a really important part of law enforcement because there's so much of it. And if you don't find a way to manage it properly or cope with it, you're going to end up with health problems. You're going to end up with burnout. Okay. Typically, human beings live in homeostasis, and homeostasis is what I'm experiencing right now. You probably are too, where we're just at a regular state of breathing, regular state of, heartbeat, heart rate. We're at rest, right? But this all gets disrupted when there's stress. So when acute stress is introduced, where we've all experienced this, where something intense happens, right? And you have a physical response, you have a fight or flight response where your body is bursted with adrenaline, so that you can either defend yourself or flee in order to protect yourself. Your respiration increases, your heart rate increases, your whole body changes. You get bursts of energy. All of the energy that is, in your core here for digestion leaves and goes to your limbs. And it's an overwhelming physical sensation. We've all had this in our lives, but police have this at a notably higher rate because they're faced with far more acute stress circumstances than an average civilian is, right? They're faced with car accidents, they're faced with violent crime, they're faced with the outcome of violent crime, and all of these things produce that acute stress. If any, you've excuse me, all had this. And think about what happens after you've had that adrenaline burst. It only lasts 30 to 45 seconds, but after that, and you come down from the adrenaline, you feel exhausted and weak. And you're like, my God, it feels like I just ran a marathon, right? So imagine having notably more of those instances in your life as a part of your job. It's going to take a toll on the body. Okay. That prolonged and repeated exposure to stress constantly can have things, impacts on the body like breaking down muscle tissue, excessive weight gain, right? So when we have a lot of stress, the more stress we have, the more our body produces cortisol, which is a hormone. And that cortisol is a reaction to the stress, and that cortisol keeps weight on the body. So weight gain is a big one with that continuous stress. Chronic stress is also something, sort of the opposite of acute stress, and officers deal with this constantly. This is the ever present, it never leaves. You're not getting an adrenaline burst and fearing for your life, but it's just always there hovering. And this is the kind of stress that's a killer. This is the kind of stress that causes heart disease slowly but surely over the course of your life. And one day, boom, you have a heart attack and you drop dead. It's cumulative. It's what we call the slow burn. It, like I said, can result in heart disease, heart attacks, can result in panic attacks, which are not at all lethal, but certainly highly unpleasant for people to experience, where you feel like you're dying, even though you're not and you're fine. So I want you to know that officers experience a lot more acute stress than the average person, and they also experience a lot more chronic stress than the average person. So what are some sources of stress for police? So there's always internal stress, which, everybody has, but officers tend to have a little bit more than others. And that can come from money problems, poor health and diet. That's a big one. Officers do not eat healthy, right? Especially when they're doing shift work, you're out and about. The only food that you can grab is fast food. And all of a sudden, fast food becomes a central part of your career, an essential part of your existence, and it's really unhealthy. So really bad diet, lack of health or happiness, self-esteem, personality types. So type A personalities tend to be very intense and tend to be much more stress ridden than people who are not type A's. They're perfectionists. They can't relax unless everything's perfect, which is almost impossible because it's very difficult to keep everything perfect all the time. Right. So internal stress. There's also a lot of stress inherent to the job. So there's so many things about this job that are stressful, right? Dealing with community members that hate you, that swear at you, that berate you, and they don't even know you, right? Dealing with community members who won't cooperate with you, which makes your job harder. Delivering death notices is obviously a huge stressor, and it is a part of the job that when there is a car accident, when there's a homicide, the people who deliver the news to those family members are going to be law enforcement officers. It's an incredibly stressful and unpleasant thing to do to watch the exceptional grief of a loved one who just lost someone and to have to do that, not overly frequently, but with some level of frequency in your career, I'm sure really eats away at your soul. Um, okay, so let's also talk about line of duty deaths. So this is a part of the job that doesn't really exist overwhelmingly in other jobs. Yes, people in other jobs die because of work-related incidents, but line of duty deaths is when you lose a colleague, a fellow colleague, a partner, a brother or a sister in arms. They die on the job, whether it's as a result of violence or as a result of a car accident. This happens more so in policing than it is going to happen in most other jobs. And remember how we talked about how tight knit and familial the structure of and the subculture of policing is, that it isn't just losing a colleague, it's losing an extended family member. So there's a lot of stress with that. Critical incidents. Police deal with critical incidents all the time, right? Whether it is seeing a horrific car wreck, which of course, seeing that kind of thing on a regular basis is going to eat away at you. Seeing, the carnage of mass shootings, seeing the outcome of domestic violence, seeing the outcome of child abuse. I'm sure that's incredibly difficult. Seeing child homicide victims, right? So they're always present for critical incidents. And then you think about all of this together, that's where the cumulative effect comes from, right? So there's just a lot. It's a lot of stress for police officers, right? Another big one where there's just a no-win situation for law enforcement is going to be suicide by cop. And suicide by cop is when an individual wants to die, but they don't want to kill themselves by their own hand, so they provoke a law enforcement officer into firing their handgun on them. This is usually mentally ill individuals or people who are looking to go down in a hail of fire. They literally force the officer into a situation where they have to use deadly force, where they are provoking the use of deadly force so the officer will kill them. I'm sure that's an incredibly overwhelming thing for an officer to have to deal with in the moment and after the fact, right? I can't begin to imagine the mental toll that takes and the emotional toll that takes. Fear of lawsuit is another big one. It's sort of the ever-present issue, right? We're a very litigious society. We like to be adversarial, go to court, try to make money that way. So it's sort of always hanging over every officer that they have to keep in the back of their mind, which is going to cause a lot of stress. Uh, and then there's, more practical things like the actual physical stressors of the job. So shift work, right? Your shift is constantly changing. You don't have a regular 9 to 5. That means your sleep is constantly changing, which means the sleep that you're getting is not good sleep. Because in order for us to have good sleep, we need to be on a regular schedule. If your schedule literally changes every third week or week to week or what have you, and you throw in the fact that you're working overtime in there, you're going to be sleep deprived. You're not going to be well rested. And that's a huge stressor, right? It's going to impact your emotional state. It's negative overall. Oh, God. Sorry, I can't stop yawning today. It's raining, and that's, I think, why I'm yawning. Um, but shift work, administrative stress, right? So when the upper level administration can be stressful to officers, like when they hand out objectives that, don't always gel with line personnel, or that objectives that line personnel are like, hey, this is impossible. We can't do this. That's going to be stressful. There's also external stress that comes from the criminal justice system, right? Being disappointed or frustrated with the way the system functions. That here's somebody I arrested, they did something really bad, I got them off the street, and you gave them a slap on the wrist plea deal, or you gave them cashless bail, and I see them again tomorrow. And then I see them again next week, causing more harm to society, right? So that's hugely stressful because it feels like they're working, they're doing their jobs, um, but they're fighting a machine that they just can't beat, right? um all of this can result in something called afterburn, which is when that on the job circumstance results in that high stress circumstance that you just can't leave it at work, and it's going to bleed into your personal life. It's going to manifest in your marriage, in the way you parent your kids. And this is where we see even more stressors. There's a high rate of divorce among officers because of this, because of shift work, because of high stress that ends up, causing damage to the marriage, because a spouse doesn't agree, that you snap out on the kids too frequently, because you're too short tempered, because you are sleep deprived and overwhelmed with stress, right? So divorce is very common. So, what are some other outcomes? I just said divorce is one of them, but what are some other outcomes? Lowered life expectancy. So this, I'm sad to say, the average life expectancy for a normal healthy adult is 78 years. But the average life expectancy for a police officer is 66 years. So that is literally shaving 12 years off your life because of that cumulative stress. That's no small sacrifice, right? And certainly, if we ever wanted tangible evidence of the stress of policing, that's it, right? That literally you die 12 years earlier than the average American. Officers who have extended careers are at higher risks of developing different kinds of cancer. They have higher rates of different physical ailments like heart disease and diabetes, right? And getting back to that really bad diet, have higher rates of mental health issues. And this is a spot where we really need to work on the way we handle mental health with law enforcement. Unfortunately, law enforcement has not made the strides in this area that we have made with the military. For the longest time, soldiers returning home from war couldn't show the trauma, couldn't show the post-traumatic stress syndrome symptoms that they would experience because it was stigmatized and it was shameful. And we've done a great job in society of erasing that stigma and saying, no, it's totally okay to respond that way. In fact, it's almost not normal if you don't respond that way after you see and do the things you do on deployment. We've gotten really good at providing support and engagement for our military. We haven't quite gotten there yet with law enforcement. And law enforcement most certainly, experiences post-traumatic stress syndrome at rates very similar to soldiers, because remember, they're dealing with conflict and tragedy on a far more regular basis than any other human being. So we really need to get there. We still have gains to make and work to do. Some behavioral manifestations of stress are going to be that hair trigger temper. We talked about substance abuse as a method of managing stress. Emotional withdrawal and isolation is very common. Unexplained urges to cry, right? These are all symptoms of cumulative stress. So if it goes untreated and unmanaged, this is what's going to be the outcome. And ultimately, the ultimate outcome is burnout, that you are overworked, that you've had too much stress and you literally can't take on more. And it erodes your job performance, or you lose interest in your work, right? Or you lose motivation in your work. Depression is very common among officers. Again, seeing the worst that society has to offer on a daily basis will do that to anybody. There is a greater suicide risk because of this stress with officers. So there's a lot of negative outcomes just from doing the job if stress is not properly managed. So how do we get officers to cope with stress? Well, there's a few things that we can, we can't make the world a nicer place, and we can't make criminals stop being criminals. But there are some things that officers can do to mitigate the stress. So first and foremost, support systems. Because it's traditionally a very masculine culture, a very tough guy culture, the idea of talking to somebody when you're upset or expressing your feelings or venting your emotions is not well embraced, but it needs to be because it is a stress management technique. It's not good to bottle all of that up. The officers see some pretty horrible things. They need to unburden themselves and not keep it bottled in. We talked about diet, so stop eating that fast food because it is, you are working strange hours, long hours. You have a very physical job, a very stressful job. You need to fuel your body with quality fuel that will maintain you and sustain you. And that is not fast food, right? Which is just going to contribute to heart disease that in tandem with the stress, and is also going to contribute to the development of type 2 diabetes, which is very common among police officers because of their poor diets. And certainly dial back the caffeine. Officers tend to mainline caffeine to keep them up during third shift and so forth. But too much caffeine is certainly bad for the body. Exercise is a great way to manage stress. It's a great way to burn stress, to cleanse the body of stress, a way to stay healthy physically and mentally. So it's important that officers maintain exercise. Making sleep a priority. I'm sure a lot of officers would laugh at that because of the shift work nature and that you have to be in court to testify and this and that and the next thing. But it really has to be a priority. Too many officers have sleep deprivation. And what does that do? It makes you less sharp cognitively. It makes your reaction time slow down. It gives you a hair trigger temper where you might overreact when you shouldn't be overreacting, right? So all of these things are cured by regular, consistent sleep. Sleep has to be a priority. Therapy, again, there's still a big stigma around that. Officers tend to dread it. Sometimes officers are mandated to do therapy after a shooting and so forth. They dread it, but we need to remove that stigma and see it as a tool, not as an embarrassment or a weakness. Training is a big one. The better trained you are, the better you know your job, the more confident you are in your skill set, the more comfortable you will feel in your own skin making the decisions that you make on the job, that what you're doing is right and appropriate for the circumstance, which will result in less stress. The next one and the final one is my suggestion and that everybody always laughs about, but it's yoga and meditation. I am very much a type A personality, and I would say that it's very hard for me to calm down. It's very hard for me to quiet my mind, but yoga and meditation does it. Gets you to a place of calmness that cannot exist in any other circumstance without going through the breathing process and the meditative process. And I think literally policing could benefit from it so much, right? Because it's such an emotional job and there's so much stress and there's so much that gets bottled up in your heart, in your soul, in your brain, in your memory. And that's yoga and meditation are a great way of controlling those intense emotions.